My name's Kevin. I'm one of the event hosts here at Powell's Books. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events by visiting our website at powells.com. One of the many events we're looking forward to is Benjamin Percy in conversation with Victor Laval about Percy's new novel, The Ninth Metal. That's going to be next Tuesday, June 3rd. And if you don't already do so, please follow us on social media. You'll get updates and announcement about all of our events coming up and everything else happening in our Powell's stores. Tonight, we are so excited to welcome Daniel Barbarisi and Jason Gay. Daniel Barbarisi is the author of Dueling with Kings, High Stakes, Killer Sharks, and the Get-Rich Promise of Daily Fantasy Sports. He's currently a senior editor at the Athletic after years as a reporter at the Wall Street Journal and the Providence Journal. Barbarisi's new book, Chasing the Thrill, is a full-throttle, first-person account of the treasure hunt created by eccentric millionaire art dealer, and some would say robber baron Forrest Fenn, that became the stuff of contemporary legend. When Fenn was given a fatal cancer diagnosis, he came up with a bold plan. He would hide a chest full of jewels and gold in the wilderness and publish a poem that would serve as a map leading to the treasure's secret location. But he didn't die, and after hiding the treasure in 2010, Fenn instead presided over a decades-long gold rush that saw thousands of treasure hunters scrambling across the Rocky Mountains in pursuit of his fortune. Barbarisi first learned of Fenn's hunt in 2017 when a friend became consumed with decoding the poem and convinced Barbarisi, a reporter, to document his search. What began as an attempt to capture the inner workings of Fenn's hunt quickly turned into a personal quest that led Barbarisi down a reckless and potentially dangerous path, one that found him embroiled in researcher conspiracies and matching wits with Fenn himself. Full of intrigue, danger, and breakneck action, Chasing the Thrill is a riveting tale of desire, obsession, and unbridled adventure. He's joining us tonight from Boston, Massachusetts. Joining Barbarisi in conversation this evening is Jason Gay. Gay is the Wall Street Journal's sports columnist and a humor columnist for its review section. The author of the 2015 bestseller, Little Victories, Jason has written for additional publications, including Vogue, GQ, Rolling Stone, and Outside. In 2016, he was named Sports Columnist of the Year by Society of Professional Journalists and was a finalist for the Thurber Prize for American Humor. Jason joins us from stormy New York City tonight. This evening's event includes an audience Q&A. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask a question. If you like someone else's question that they've asked, go ahead and click the thumbs up button, and that will get that question to the top of the list. More importantly, please consider supporting Daniel and Powell's by purchasing a copy of his new book from us. A link to buy Chasing the Thrill, along with a link to Jason's book, will be shared in the chat a couple of times this evening. Daniel, Jason, it's great to have you both here. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for having us here. And you don't have to buy my book, just buy two of Danny's books. He's the star of the night. You know, the last time I saw you, Dan, you were this like buttoned up, like baseball reporter. You look nice with a nice shirt on. Now you are a swashbuckling, immersive journalist. Your career has gone off in such eccentric directions. I want to get to all that, but this is a topic here, this book. This is a subject that I believe there are going to be people on this call who know almost everything there is to know about this. And then there are going to be some folks who are joining us who might not know anything at all or very little about it. So I want to try to bridge the gap here and fill in some blanks. And let's start with this, Dan. We heard a little bit at the top about Forrest Fenn, but who was he and what was this treasure hunt?
Forrest Fenn was a very interesting guy, to say it, succinctly and undersell it. He was literally a fighter pilot turned art dealer to the stars of Southwestern art, and became very famous and, had hugely, powerful, famous friends, was a real man about town in Santa Fe. who is not known for any of that. What he's known for now is the very final chapter of his life, which was when he started the treasure hunt, which, as was mentioned in that intro there, and so in 1988, he had a fatal form of cancer, believed to be fatal. And he was in his study with his friend, Ralph Lauren, who, wanted to buy a piece off him. And he said Fenn wouldn't sell it to him. And Ralph Lauren said, "Come on, Forrest, you can't take it with you." And Fenn said, "Well, what if I can?" And so he came up with this plan, to fill a treasure chest and to then, write this poem that would lead people to it. And he expected initially that he was actually going to put the chest next to himself, go out there and die next to it, likely take some pills, and that would be the end. And then someone would find him and his bones years later in this special spot that he envisioned. But he didn't die. He beat the cancer, but he liked the plan. And so, over the next 20 plus years, he actually spent a lot of time refining it and revising what was in the chest and revising the poem. And then finally in 2010 or thereabouts, we believe, he actually does do it. And he publishes this book, The Thrill of the Chase, which has the poem in it. And he sets off this treasure hunt. And it starts out pretty small for a while, but then around 2013, it really blows up and becomes this huge phenomenon with, tens and tens and thousands of searchers seeking this thing and out there and getting in trouble and falling in love and, just creating all the chaos and craziness that goes with a unique phenomenon in a big community. And, that's kind of where I entered the story around 2017.
I'm going to ask you to do something a little unusual for an author, not to read your own book, but to read this poem, because I believe it's only 24 lines, and it is a really important part of this story because, do I have it correct? I mean, this is what people were drawing on for a very long time in terms of, trying to figure out where to go.
Yeah, I mean, the poem is the core of it. There are other things, it turns out that, to solve Forrest Fenn's treasure hunt, you have to really understand Forrest Fenn. So it really is about the man in so many ways. And so, his personal memoir here becomes very, very important in that too. And understanding him and a few of his other books and a lot of things about his life become important. But the poem is the core of it all. Absolutely. So I'm happy to read that.
You can read it.
What's that?
I'm not going to ask you to do it by heart. You can go off.
No. It's funny. At times I've been able to. Right now, I'm not sure if I could off the top of my head, but I'll just read it.
Okay.
All right. So, as I have gone alone in there, and with my treasures bold, I can keep my secret where, and hint of riches new and old. Begin it where warm waters halt, and take it in the canyon down. Not far, but too far to walk. Put in below the home of Brown. From there, it's no place for the meek. The end is ever drawing nigh. There'll be no paddle up your creek, just heavy loads and water high. If you've been wise and found the blaze, look quickly down your quest to cease. But tarry scant with marvel gaze, just take the chest and go in peace. So why is it that I must go and leave my trove for all to seek? The answers I already know. I've done it tired, and now I'm weak. So hear me all and listen good. Your effort will be worth the cold. If you are brave and in the wood, I give you title to the gold. So there we are.
I'm ready to go look for some treasure, Dan.
Yeah, I know it's gone though. That's the problem. It's not there anymore.
It's not there, and we'll get to that. But you mentioned, your introduction to this saga was not terribly long ago, 2017. Were you immediately drawn to it? Did this strike you as a source material for a book right away?
I was drawn to it in so many ways. I mean, when I first heard about this, I honestly didn't believe that it had existed for so long without my noticing. I was like, wait, there's a treasure hunt, like a real treasure hunt, and I've never heard of this. It's been out here for like 7 years. So I was totally, first of all, like blown away by that. And my first thought was, I want to go be a treasure hunter. So my buddy actually from the last book, which you, I believe, read, Dueling with Kings, was so Jay Rayner, Beep I'm a Jeep, who was my mentor in that book, who kind of taught me about the world of DraftKings and FanDuel, and then led me to the title of Fantasy Hockey World Champion eventually. He became my friend over this whole thing. And so in 2017, he kind of drops off the map for a little while. And I'm like, Jay, what's going on? Where'd you go? And like 3 weeks later, he gets back to me and he's like, have you heard of the treasure of Forrest Fenn? And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And then he kind of, introduces me to the whole thing. And so, very quickly, I was like, I want to be a treasure hunter. And also, I want to tell the story of this thing. I honestly couldn't believe that there hadn't been a book about it yet. And so, I was like, all right, this thing needs to be told in big time form. This is a big story. Somebody needs to kind of go deep into this. And, having just done the kind of, participatory journalism thing, I was like, I can apply that here too. And go down this rabbit hole and have a little fun with it and be a treasure hunter. And, you know, it'll hopefully be this incredible, wonderful lark. And then I get into it, and then almost immediately people start dying. So it was like, oh, this is not quite the lark I thought it was, but there's a big story here. So, you know, I was trying to do both of those things at the same time, almost from the very start.
I want to get to the risk and the, you know, tragedies that are associated with this search, but I want to get to a thing you mentioned a moment ago about just, you know, being an immersive journalist in this. You're not just here chronicling what's going on, you're actually deciding to engage as a participant. That's something, of course, you did in Dealing with Kings. What appeals to you as a writer about the idea of being actually in the throw of the action as opposed to being the observer?
I think it does allow you to really, you know, have that kind of fun internal monologue and translate that out onto the page. And, you know, the events that are happening around you, you can really just see them through your own eyes and translate that to the readership. And I really enjoy the ability to do that. At the same time, you know, it also really lets you to some degree have more control of the narrative than if you're just, okay, I'm going to follow these 4 people and whatever they do is what the book is, you know, then you're really at the mercy of those 3 or 4 people or whatever it is, your subjects. So you lack a certain element of narrative control when you do that. And also then when you have yourself in there, you know, it actually really does allow you to spackle over, I would say, some narrative cracks if you need to. So I found it to be like a very useful method in all those ways. You know, but it also, it comes with a tremendous amount of stress, unfortunately, because you are putting yourself very front and center in so many ways. And if people hate you as character, they're probably going to hate your book, and they're going to hate you forever also, which is no fun. And, you know, it also, I mean, you know, it comes with a lot of, it becomes much more fraught, I think, than the kind of regular, just, I am a journalist experience. You have to deal with a lot of, okay, where's the line on this? Where's the line on that? What's okay for me to do? What's not? You know, when am I crossing it in the service of the book? And when am I crossing it just in the service of myself? You know, what should I do here? What shouldn't I do here? And so, you know, those things I try to incorporate into the narrative and those questions, and try to say, okay, I'm just throw them out there. Like, that's my method on it, is just, here's what I'm dealing with. I'm not sure what the right answer is. Here's why I chose what I did. Have at it, people. And so that's basically how I've chosen to address those kind of things. And, you know, for the most part, it has worked, but it really does, you know, you are much more exposed when you are the main character, or at least the prism character for the other people to be seen through. And so I do, you know, look, I've never written a book that doesn't have this, but I feel like I basically have a nervous breakdown, like right before the book comes out every time, you know, like, and I think a lot of that is tied to not just like, will people like the book, but like, am I going to be hated personally till the end of time because I'm a jerk in my own book?
How much convincing did this take at home? I mean, you know, your first book, all you're doing is gambling away the family nest egg on professional hockey games. But this, you know, there was risk to this. You know, people have literally died, and I don't want to, like, you know, make any light of that. That was a very serious situation. But how did your family and friends react to this when you proposed that you were going to do it?
I mean, there's a lot of things that were different from the first book. I think, you know, I think that having success and having done this the first time and having been able to say, it's fine, I won the title the first time, I'll go find the treasure, did give me a little bit of leeway in terms of being able to say, trust me, it'll work out okay. But at the same time, my family situation was very different than it was in the 2015-ish, 16-ish era when that was all happening. So, you know, as is chronicled in the book, like basically when I'm going on my first treasure hunts, you know, I'm about to have my first kid like 2 weeks after. And so, you know, I left my 8-month pregnant wife home while I'm like busy tromping around the wilderness, like an idiot with no ability to know what I'm doing, and, you know, very, very incompetently. So, you know, the trips and all that became much more difficult to schedule and work in. And so I really, like, I owe my wife family so much more credit for this one than I do the previous book. I mean, like, you know, there's the, you know, this couldn't happen without her line, but no, this could not have happened without her on any level. And that, you know, but she just gets it. She gets that, like, unfortunately, to tell a story like this, you got to throw yourself in there. You know, when you get a chance to meet with Forrest Fenn, you got to go run and do it. You know, when this hunter wants to show you this in Yellowstone, you got to run and do it. When your, you know, treasure hunting partner says, we got to go now, I know where the treasure, you got to go and do it. So, you know, there's a lot of, thankfully, I have a lot of flexibility there. I was able to do a lot of these things with that in mind. So, I mean, yeah, like, I don't think I can do these kind of books forever, you know, in the sense of it does wear too much on the life to do it like this. But I was able to pull this one off thanks to her.
you are one of thousands in this hunt, at the time that you get going. And why do you think this became such a fascination? Because it's actually something that built over time. I mean, it wasn't, initially the phenomenon that it became. But what do you think? What was the appeal of this? Why did it speak to people? Because it wasn't purely about the money or the contents inside, I don't think.
I don't think so at all. It's funny, when I first got into it, I was like, oh, everyone wants to get rich off this, but it's not that at all. I mean, in some ways, that's the validation to your search, but I don't think that that's the reason for the search. I think everybody in this thing wanted to beat the poem. They wanted to solve it and show that they could be the one who did. They wanted to, a lot of them found a real fascination with Forrest Fenn himself. The fact that he was involved in his treasure hunt, I think really took it to another level. That you could essentially ask questions of God once you got into this thing. You could email him and he would maybe email you back. I mean, that makes a big difference here. I think also just the elements of it and him that are different from just, I hit a box somewhere out there, that brought this to another level. I mean, his writings, the kind of nostalgic Americana to them, just a lot of the idea that this was this bigger story here that captured the imagination, that this guy went and did this, and that then you could become a part of this story. I think all that kind of went together in it. And I do think that as well, that as the community started to build up, that really fostered a lot of this, because people became close to each other, they became competitive with each other. It created a level of, of a race element to it. Even though if nobody was close, it didn't matter because nobody knew that nobody was close. And, Fenn, I think, was very, very skilled at stoking the flames with individuals and communally. And I think he really enjoyed that people were looking after his chest or looking out for his chest. And that, he certainly didn't mind, priming that pump from time to time and, keeping people on the line there. I think he got a kick out of that in a lot of ways. So all of that, I think, worked together.
Is there something old-fashioned and sort of intrinsically American about this story too? It's set largely in the West, a place that has rich traditions of risk-taking and even real treasure hunting in prior generations. Is that drawing on an old American impulse, you think?
I think very much so. And I think it intentionally puts itself in that. I think Fenn very consciously did that in a lot of ways. And, he also, I mean, yes, the idea that there's many things American about this, and someone made the joke to me at one point recently that what's really American about it is that everyone thought they were going to win and only one person did. So, I think there's something to that too. But, I think the whole concept of it definitely is, speaks to that Wild West mentality that, go out there as the individual and seek your fortune, and all that stuff is there. And again, Fenn's writings are really grounded in that. All this stuff in his books is about the idyllic life of, a kid out in the 1940s, playing in streams and, just being a part of this old world that doesn't exist anymore. And he tries to draw people back into that world. And that's, that was his stated goal in so many ways, that he wanted to get kids off their phones and families off the couch and back into the wilderness. And then he crafted this world which was built around that and said, go find my treasure in this, learn my stories, learn my history, kind of relive my life in an odd way. And, that will lead you to this treasure. And so I think that very much he was hearkening back to that. I think that was one of the things that was very appealing about it to a lot of people.
How did you start? How did you start your quest? Because it's not the kind of thing where you just kind of look at a map and kind of say, well, we'll cover all this area. I mean, you're talking about a vast slice of terrain potentially, and you have limited time and plane tickets are expensive and all that. Where do you begin?
So originally in the book, he says the chest is located in the mountains north of Santa Fe. So my first thought is, oh, this is somewhere in northern New Mexico. But over the time that the chest was out there, he had additionally, he released a lot of additional information, and he started to say it's in the Rocky Mountains north of Santa Fe. So, that search area is in essentially 4 states wide. He limited it in some points, but you're dealing essentially with Colorado, northern New Mexico, most of Wyoming, and, parts of Montana. So in that, there are a lot of places in the book that show up there. So you kind of go, you look at the poem, you look at the book, you look at the things that show up, and you say, okay, what applies? And a lot of people came up with the same basic areas, around the Firehole River in Yellowstone, or sometime around Hedgen Lake in Montana, the Taos area in northern New Mexico, sometimes the area around Pilar, New Mexico, which is actually where we made our first search, around the Rio Grande in northern New Mexico. Some people near Dinosaur National Monument in Colorado, near Browns Park in Colorado. There's a lot of different places that became like big spots.
Yeah.
And so a lot of searchers went to a lot of those. And, I think that there were a lot of almost go-to places. But so, we made our first search in northern New Mexico. That was more off, my thoughts, although my treasure hunting partner, Beep, from the last book, he was much more convinced that it was in the the Wyoming area, in the Yellowstone area.
Right.
And so, but that first trip we were able to go actually, and I was able to go interview Fenn the first time. And it was also the time of this big event called Fennbaree, which is this annual, basically Forrest Fenn party, it's a Forrest Fenn jamboree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, since we were going to go do those things as well, it was like, all right, let's do our first searches in New Mexico. And, that's some of the stuff that's the first parts of the book.
This extraordinary and eccentric community of people who are searching for this, how much information sharing is happening? Are people like all kind of keeping things close to the vest, or is there a little bit of source sharing where people say, well, I did that area, and trust me, it's not there, and crossing things off?
It's a little of both, and it's also in a lot of different scenarios where you see, one or the other. So it's funny, like on the message boards, people are very, very cagey, and they're very protective of themselves. And then you get them in person, and they're like, a lot of them can't wait to tell you their solve because they want to tell you how smart it is, and they want the reaction they're going to get, and then it seems like I ran into, maybe it was just me because I was, the journalist / hunter, but I mean, people couldn't wait a lot of the time to tell me like, okay, and then you do this, 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 and then I'm closing in, I'm almost this. And, and sometimes you run into people who would say like, I know exactly where it is. This is where it is. And I would say, well, why haven't you gone and gotten it then? And you'd get different answers to that, and my favorite one was one where it said, I just want it to be out there for other people to search for. I don't want to take that away from other people. Okay, cool. Sounds good. I respect that as a concept, at least. So, you run into a lot of different things on this.
How prepared were you for what you were going to get yourself into? You are an East Coast kid. You are not somebody who grew up in the mountains and in river and whitewater rafting and all that kind of stuff. How ready were you for this?
I would say completely unprepared. I just didn't have any idea what you need at all. I mean, like on our first hunt, we go up to, the Rio Grande area, and we're thinking, okay, we're going to go find this thing. We're going to go to this path that we found on Google Maps, and it's going to be right there. And we're going to go pick up the treasure, basically. Like, obviously we're idiots. We had no idea, but we really didn't know how little an idea we had, like the trail wasn't there. We suddenly get stormed on. We run back to the car. Suddenly it starts hailing. I'm like, we're in the desert. It hails here. What is this? So, we just had nothing. And I just had no idea, it's like, what I really didn't understand, I knew that I didn't know anything. That part I was fully aware of. But what I didn't understand in a realistic sense was just the vastness of the distances. And, because you look on like a Google map, right? And you're like, okay, so we'll go from here, then we'll walk to there, then we'll walk to there. Like walk from there to there is like half your day.
It's this much space. It's
right. And, even if you look at it and it says, well, 3 miles, it's like you're in the woods, man. You're like, you're like, it's miles, and it's impossible terrain a lot of these times. And so, it's just that kind of stuff is what you start to learn, how difficult it is to get from A to B to then C to E, et cetera. That's, it's just not happening that way. So that stuff did take me by surprise. My own lack of knowledge did not, but to be out there and see how vast it was and to just experience how vast it was and have to start to plan for that later. And how much stuff you have to bring to actually do it right and not put yourself in danger. That is, I was never a very good treasure hunter, but I got better as time went on.
Let's speak about the danger of this, because that's related obviously to what you're describing. People died, 5 in total, just a devastating, tragic loss of life. And it prompted a number of calls in the moment and then hereafter, including from law enforcement, on Fenn to stop this, just to stop this process, stop the hunt. He declined. Why did he decline, you think?
I think he believed his treasure hunt was a force for good, and it's not that he didn't care about the deaths of people. He cared very much. These were people who who went out there because of his treasure hunt. He would very quickly tell you he was not responsible for their deaths, but he certainly knew that he was involved in their deaths. And so, I think he felt very strongly about their deaths and the tragedy of it, and he was very sad about it, but he also cared about his treasure hunt a great deal. And he felt like it was something that should exist in the world, and that his its ability to inspire people to go out there and seek something was valuable. And look, at the same time, this was a stubborn guy. This was a guy who did not like being told what to do. So, you know, if the chief of the New Mexico State Police says, call off your treasure hunt, I mean, that's almost more reason for him to say, no, I'm not going to do that, you know? So he had a lot of lines, you know, he had almost, you know, go-to lines. He would say, you know, yeah, you know, this number of people die in the Grand Canyon every year. You know, we don't shut the Grand Canyon, you know,
Right.
and
If
somebody drowns in the pool, we don't drain the pool. We teach people to swim. You know, he had a bunch of things he would go back to time after time. And, you know, he would, however, release hints and things like that that would narrow the search area and try to get people to understand, you know, you can't go do this. You know, you don't go somewhere where an 80-year-old man couldn't have gone. It's not there. I hid this thing. I'm an 80-year-old man. You know, it's not above this elevation. It's not below this elevation, that kind of stuff. And some people listened to that and some people didn't, is the reality.
It did start to create, however, this sort of churn of negativity that sort of existed in a parallel track to the excitement, right? That, like, in addition to the fact that there were all these people who were very enthusiastically searching for this, there was also this strong current of, I don't know if backlash is the correct term, you know, against Fenn. It affected his family. And this is all sort of actively happening at a time when he's still around and being, you know, sort of the ringleader of all this.
Yeah, I mean, look, the hunt was very controversial on a lot of levels. You know, this was not some simple story of a treasure out in the wilderness. You know, the reality is this is a human story. When you put a treasure out there, you know, what happens? What goes right? What goes wrong? That's really what I was trying to capture is, you know, what are the unintended consequences to some extent when you put a treasure into the modern world? You know, what does it lead to? And, you know, it leads to a lot of things. And so, you know, Fenn was very much in the middle of all this at all times. And, you know, people took sides on it. People were on every end of it, you know, and it's not just about the deaths, but about a lot of other stuff too. And so, you know, it at all times he you know, this was his hunt and he was wrapped up in it in every way. And so, you know, a lot of times people found him defensive on a lot of things, but he felt he was questioned a lot of the time. He really was about so much of this, and his hunters were too. And so, you know, it was never, at least never in the time I was in it, it was never some simple idyllic thing. You know, it was people are chasing it, but there's danger and there's controversy and there's chaos. And, you know, it always felt that way to me, honestly, like the entire time I was in it.
You're a sports writer by experience and by training. Did it feel like a sport at times to you? Did you see parallels to sports?
A little bit. I mean, look, it was competitive. You know, people were definitely, you know, racing each other to the treasure, even if they weren't really, they felt that way.
Right.
And, you know, there were definitely people who were viewed as stars within this, you know, people who were kind of on first name bases in the community. And, you know, there were many people who, you know, saw them as lead searchers and stuff like that. And, you know, again, it was very much, I think, competitive. And I think there were certainly sport elements to it. You know, anything outdoorsy has some of that for sure. But, you know, yeah, at the end, yeah, I mean, it was a very strange, you know, very human story on many levels.
So a remarkable thing happens about a year ago around this time. Fenn announces that it has been found. And how deep were you into your manuscript at that point? And was this the kind of thing where you kind of had to like pull up stakes and do a colossal rewrite? Were you able to, you know, like how much did this change the game? Because that's obviously a momentous occasion.
Yeah, it was like, so I remember we had actually just lost power that day. And so like a tree had come down on our street. And so I like was hardly using my phone, you know, everything was out. You're trying to like, you know, the fridge has to stay closed so that, you know, the cold doesn't escape, all that jazz. And, you know, I get a message basically from a coworker at the Athletics saying like, did you see this? Did you find the treasure? And I'm like, wait, what? And I'm like, oh my God, somebody found the treasure. Because a week before I had turned in essentially a draft manuscript of the book to my editors. And I was like, all right, here you go. Like, you know, we'll tweak some things, but how's this? And I was still waiting to hear back on that. And then I was like, oh my God. I was like, this is the most horrific thing that has ever happened. So, I mean, so, you know, fortunately, very fortunately, in the end, it actually turned out really, really well for me. But fortunately at the time, you know, I mean, the book was never the story of the finding of the treasures. It was the story of the treasure hunt. So right. I didn't have to rip the whole thing up. You know, what I did was I essentially just lopped off the last 3 chapters and was like, goodbye. And frankly, the final chapter was trash anyway. So my ending was not very good. So I had no problem with the idea that like somebody was potentially going to give me another ending now. So at that point, it was just, okay, I got to figure out what's going to happen with this thing. And now I'm just totally in reactive mode, just, okay, where is this going to go? What's happening? Just calling searchers and saying like, what's going on? What are you feeling? What are you hearing? Trying to hang on everything from Fenn, just trying to chronicle it at that point, and which is tough from across the country in the middle of a pandemic. You can't just fly out there. So
you managed, and this involves some ingenious sleuthing on your part, but you managed relatively quickly, once this person sort of anonymously took credit, to reach out and establish pen pal is not the correct term in the first century, but you quickly became email buddies with this finder, and had a communication with this person even before you knew this person's name. What was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, from a telling the book part, that was a huge win, of course, so that was when I went from kind of reactive to proactive in the storytelling, in terms of, for the last 4 months before that, I was just like, whatever happens, I'm just going to try to follow along. And so then Forrest Fenn died in early September of 2020.
There's a seismic part of this story, right?
Yes, absolutely. And so, at that point, we don't know if anything's ever really going to come out, because at that point there was no finder, or, the finder was anonymous. And then the treasure location was not revealed either. So basically no one knew like anything. All we knew was that some guy from back east had found it and didn't know really anything about this person. It had a few pictures of the chest. It was just like so little to go on. And so many people in the community, myself included, were like, what happened here? Did Fenn, end this thing? Was it the chest pulled? All these conspiracies are flying around. And, because there was a lack of information at the time, and then Fenn's gone. So you just don't know if you're ever going to get closure on this. And then, 2 weeks later, the finder posted an essay on Medium, the kind of self-publishing platform. And I was able to kind of figure out a way. And so you can't just write, so the author of a post on Medium, you can't do that. It doesn't let you do it.
By the way. Yeah.
I was pretty stoked about it. Yeah, I really was. So you can't write a message to the author of something on Medium, which is what makes it so good on an anonymous platform. And if you put your name in the comments, then anyone can email you. There's literally no reason to do that. Right. You're just opening yourself up to like crazies being like, I found the treasure. Right. So what I did was I flagged a typo. There's like one way to get somebody to see a private message Medium, which is that you flag a typo in the actual essay, and you get like a very small amount of space. And I wrote basically like, here's my email address, writing book, Daniel Barbarisi, contact me. And I was very lucky that he actually knew of my existence already and at the project I was doing, and he contacted me like a day later. And so
yeah, I think this is some of your old baseball writer ingenuity coming out, because you know what it's like to stand in a room of 25 people trying to interview Derek Jeter, and you can't just like ask a question that you really have a hot story going on in front of all these people. You got to figure out some way to get it.
Yeah, you got to get your back way in. Absolutely. Yeah. And look, old news and crime reporter stuff I used to do before that, I thought it was more like crime reporter style, but absolutely, yes, me and Jeets for sure. Definitely that played a part there.
and so did our finder here, we'll reveal his name momentarily, but did he strike you as legit, like from the start, or were you kind of saying I might have an unreliable narrator here?
No. I mean, so from the start of reading the Medium essay, I was like, oh no, this is the guy. There were things that the way he talked about it, he was clearly somebody who had been heavily invested in this. He understood a lot of stuff that people who hadn't been in it just wouldn't get. Yeah. And the things he related about Fenn, the way Fenn talked, like this was somebody who had spent time with Fenn, because it all lined up to the things I had felt when I had spent time with Fenn, and he's a different guy in some ways than he is, in you're having lunch with him, than he is, the guy who's giving interviews on the screen, So, right away I was like, oh yeah, this guy, he lines up. Obviously that's not proof, but I felt that he was from the beginning. Absolutely. And so, and I was corresponding with him for some time, before I had any real proof, shall we say, but I very much believed that this was the guy. And I set about trying to find ways to establish that, and also to get him to trust me and to get him to let me interview him, obviously. So, there was a months-long correspondence to that effect, when that entire time I did not know who he was. I had no idea what his name was. I just knew he was the finder. We talked about all kinds of stuff, but I never knew who he was, which is a very strange scenario to be like having all these emails back and forth with this guy, and you have no idea who he is.
I find it fascinating that his contention was that it was effectively all there in the poem, right? I mean, that it's sort of like the real, guts of what to do could be located in Fenn's words, that original source material.
Yes, although I think he would say that I think that the context of the book is very important, and understanding Forrest Fenn is very important, and he did, when he found the thing, he also relied on things that were not in the book, slip ups, as he called them, that Fenn made in interviews over time. And so those things informed him.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, so yes, the poem itself is essentially a map of a journey. It's of Fenn's journey to go to the place where he wanted to die. And so it is very literal in that way. Many people look at this, there's anagrams, there's GPS coordinates. He's like, no, there's none of that stuff. It's essentially a very literal journey if you understand it correctly. But to do that, you do also need to understand Forrest Fenn, the man himself, his motivations, the context, who he is, for a lot of things.
So tell us who our solver is, and tell us a little bit about his background and how his book came to light.
Yeah. So, in December of 2020, when after he and I had been, talking for a while, he dropped a fairly unexpected email in my inbox, which said that, so there have been a few lawsuits out there against Fenn and against, by extension, the finder, whoever he was. And it turned out that it was likely that in one of the lawsuits, his name was going to be exposed eventually. And so he said, look, it's going to get out anyway. This is who I am. And I was like, oh, God. So, turned out that our finder was a 32-year-old guy out of Michigan named Jack Stoof. And he had been a medical student at the time. And, he'd actually he'd worked in media like 10 years before.
Journalist briefly,
Yeah. He was at Wonkette and did some BuzzFeed stuff and at The Onion, and then he decided to go to medical school. But it was just funny because I was like, I knew he had something to do with media because he was too good with understanding, the exact ramifications of things, the difference between like off the record and background and stuff like that. He knew the specific things that you often have to explain to people.
When you would talk to him, he would sort of have that kind of
he understood the distinctions of everything. He's like, no, we both need to agree to off the record first here. And I was like, well, yeah, that's exactly what we need to, I was like, okay. He understood that stuff, on a level that made me think this guy knows this stuff too well.
Yeah.
So I didn't know who he was. I had never heard of Jack Stoof before he gave me his name, but I was not stunned to learn that he had something to do with media at one point in his life, for sure. So, and then basically once I knew who he was, I was like, okay, well, if you think your stuff's going to come out eventually, can I be the one who tells the world who you are? Can I kind of tell them, can I write a story about it? And he was like, yeah, okay. So, so then we started to kind of get to work on what became the Outside Magazine article, which published I believe on December 7th, 2020. And that was done in a very short period of time because it was possible that the name was going to come out in the early part of that next week. So it was like, okay, write this story, find a platform and get it out to the world like ASAP. And then I was able to do that.
Back to this, because this is a fact. You're being very humble here, but you are revealing deep throat of this story. This is just an enormous scoop within the context of this hunt. What's the blowback to it once people know his actual identity?
Yeah, I mean, it went totally viral. Absolutely. It was like pretty much everywhere. This guy was the guy. And, there was a lot of, from the community, there was a lot of, okay, this is the guy, we have a finder now. Then there was also, a level of, that's not it. He's not the guy. It can't be him. He didn't find it, and what are you going to do? He very quickly became the focus of everything. And I think, he thought that this was going to be like a cataclysmic moment for his life because, look, finding a treasure is not all sunshine and roses. A lot of people who wanted to find that treasure themselves now, resent you for it. And, there was certainly absolutely a level of that and a level of anger and mistrust and all these kind of things. But I think he was actually surprised by that it wasn't as bad as he thought it was going to be. And that a lot of people really were, friendly and happy and, happy for him and just wanted to know a lot about stuff about the treasure. So, he actually ended up emailing with a lot of people. I think he felt a responsibility to the community to try to answer questions as long as it didn't do one thing, which is that he didn't want to do, which is reveal the location of the treasure, where it was actually found.
Let's talk about that, because that's a big part of this, which is that there's a school of thought that revealing it would give closure to searchers, that they would be able to at least figure out like if they were close, if they were not close, give a little bit of insight into Fenn. But I believe Jack's contention is that he doesn't want this to turn into like some sort of impromptu or
like a pilgrimage site or a tourist attraction
and trash, a beautiful environmental area. What do you make of that? Do you think it's the kind of thing that there might be a way for him to reveal it, or at least the proximity to it?
Well, so initially they revealed nothing. So Fenn and the Finder revealed nothing when that thing came out in June. And then, I think it was maybe 6 weeks later. I'm not exactly sure the exact date. Maybe it was early August or late July, whatever it was. They revealed that it was actually in Wyoming. So in the effort,
so was Peep like, I told you, Dan, what were we doing?
Yeah, he wasn't, because he was nice about it. But yeah, I sucked at this from the beginning. I was like, it's in New Mexico. I was always wrong, man. But there were a lot of people who, initially then said, no, it's not. It's in Colorado anyway. Or no, it's not. It's in New Mexico anyway. And I think, this is my opinion, not his that I know of, but I think that was very telling to him, that basically, even if they did tell people where it was, they probably, a lot of them still wouldn't believe it. A lot of them would still say, that's not really where it is. I know where it is. Sure. And that does happen. I get certainly those kind of emails a lot. And so, look, I think that, it would provide closure to a lot of people, but I think he's also probably right that site then becomes a pilgrimage spot. And, he feels very strongly that it was a place that was special to Forrest Fenn. And it was a place that became special to him, as a result of searching for it. And he does have a certain reverence for it. And, look, Jack, Forrest Fenn was a stubborn guy. I will say that Jack is a, single-minded or stubborn guy to some extent as well. I think that's part of why he found the treasure. And so, he's not somebody who's easily shaken off things. And, there have been a lot of people who've been very unhappy about his decisions to not do that. Very unhappy. But, he believes this. He believes this is the right thing to do. And I think he feels a responsibility to the hunt and to Fenn and to the whole thing to do it what he believes is the right way.
Can you just tell us where it is? Just to keep between us and the 45 or so people who are.
I am very, very happy to say that I do not know where it is. And that was essentially one of the things that Jack and I agreed on, that I'm not going to try to find out where it is. I don't want to carry that information. Yeah. I mean, no, that's exactly right. I wanted him to trust me and not have to worry about that, also to talk to me. Because again, I was trying for a long time to get him to trust me and get him to talk to me.
Right.
But also I didn't want to know where it is, because that would make me then essentially the conduit to get that information. And people would just go to me instead of Jack. I'm out here doing media appearances. I don't want that. So yeah. I very actively, declined to, try to find it or try to find out where it was, or use any of the knowledge I have from interviewing him to say, oh, well, this probably means this, or this probably means that. I am like, boom, have made zero efforts toward that, because I don't want to know. And I want people to know that I don't know. So, I have been very, I'm as stubborn as he is in that regard. And I'm like, I got, like conceptually, am I curious? Okay, sure. But to me, it's not worth it. So no, thanks.
I just want to remind the folks who are tuning into us that if they have a question that they'd like answered by Dan, to type it into the Q&A portion of it, and we will make sure to get to it. You got to see this thing. You got to see the treasure.
You're giving away the ending.
but I mean, did it live up to your expectations?
So, that is a question that has multiple answers. Okay. Yes, in the sense of, finally getting to see and touch Forrest Fenn's treasure was like incredible. This is this thing you've thought about for 4 years and envisioned, and all of a sudden it's in your hands. And that's like crazy. And nobody else basically got to do that. And I get to touch these things, that people got to talk about, and you kind of envision what they look like, and you're feeling the weight of the gold nuggets, and you're examining the dragon bracelet and all this stuff. And so in that regard, it was, incredible. It really was. It was like a life thrill. At the same time, you're also looking, you're kind of like, this thing is kind of small. This treasure chest is not like some big giant thing out of Aladdin, where you've just got gold overflowing and flying out there, and your magic carpets on top and all that. It's not that. It's a little box. It's this little 10-5 box, and it's filled with stuff, and that stuff's cool, but it's we all have this vision in our mind of what a treasure chest is. And then, you encounter a treasure chest in real life, and okay, treasure chest, what do you really like? And, it is a different version of that. And so, look, I was absolutely blown away by it. I thought it was the coolest thing. When I finally got to go through it, I was just like ripping stuff out of it. I think in the book, I said, some sort of Kid on Christmas Morning concept, but you don't want to get to the bottom, because until you get to the bottom, anything could be in there, anything. And then when you do, you kind of have this empty box, and it's like, oh, so that there's a lot of really cool feelings that were involved with it, honestly. And so, yes, in every way, it was like it lived up to expectations and exceeded them in most ways. At the same time, it's also not what's in your mind's eye.
Mm-hmm. So what's the status of the treasure at the moment?
It's being essentially prepared for sale. He's going through the process of getting it ready to be sold at some point. And there's a lot that is to that apparently. So there's various things, and so I don't know when it's going to be sold or posted for sale or any of that stuff. But that's his intention, is to sell it.
And is there a thought to like whether you're going to sell it as a single lot or they might break it up into multiple things?
That is one of the questions I believe that's being looked at. I think that there are positives and negatives to doing it both ways. If it's as the Fenn treasure, it might gain more that way, but then, it might be that there's so many people who want to own one small part of the Fenn treasure that could lead. So there are thought processes either way, and he and I have discussed some of those, but I don't know where they're going to go with that.
We have a question from an audience member, Dominic, who is asking, what is the status of the lawsuits and what are they relating to specifically?
They were to different things. Some of them said that, Fenn needed to give the treasure to this specific person because this person had come up with the solve and Fenn had promised it to them. There's that kind of stuff. There was one that said that the finder had stolen the solution from a woman outside Chicago, and then harassed her about it. It's those kind of things. And I believe that those are either all at this point dismissed or perpetually on hold, essentially. So I think for a long time, there was a lot of question about, are those holding things up? And I think they were for a long time. I don't believe they are anymore, but I am not 100% certain about that. But for the most part, they have been dealt with, I believe.
Right. An audience member named Carl has a question about the find itself. Was the box clearly visible when in the proximity, or was it sort of out of sight?
So interestingly, Jack, when he was telling me about his hunts for his solve, he said that he actually went over the exact spot, essentially where the chest was on a previous search. He might have even literally walked over the chest before. On a previous search, full different search attempt, like a different trip out there. But it was, so Fenn put the chest in what Jack calls kind of a nook, which is kind of like a depression in the ground, essentially. I don't know how deep it was exactly, but, uneven ground, I would say. And then he basically just left it there and walked away. And so, he didn't bury the chest, but over time, over 10 years, the elements kind of did, all of a sudden dirt and pine needles and all this stuff are coming in there, and all this stuff just cakes on top of this chest, so that, to my understanding, it was largely not visible. It was certainly not visible from far away at all. You had to be very close and know what you were looking for. And so, when he actually did find it, he's going back through an area he had absolutely been over before. But this time he knew what to look for in terms of the blaze, which, as we read during the poem reading portion of this, the blaze is essentially the final clue. You find the blaze, you're very close proximity to the chest. And so this time he thought he understood what the blaze was. And so he saw something on the ground, which looked like, maybe something that wasn't exactly natural. And then he looked up and saw the blaze, what he understood that to be, and then looked back down and thought, treasure chest, and that's when he started unearthing it and all that. And actually, uncovering it and opening it and seeing, yes, there is a treasure chest here.
And he worked alone, as they say.
Yes. He was absolutely a solitary hunter. He didn't, there were a lot of like teams and things like that, and people who had search partners, and, that's a good way to do it. Forrest Fenn would tell you, don't go out searching alone. Sure. Bring somebody with you. That was one of his, don't die tips. And so, but Jack actually did do all his searches alone and all his, preparations alone and all that stuff. He was very much like the solitary hunter.
Now, it wouldn't be 2021 or 2020 without some conspiracy theories flying around, and there has been some disputation of whether or not this actually happened as the way it's been described, and whether or not maybe Jack and Forrest were in cahoots somehow to bring an end to this. Do you feel strongly convinced that it played out the way that it's been said it's been played out?
I do. I really do. It's funny because for a long time, like, nobody believed any of the Jack stuff. He doesn't even really have the treasure. These photos are all photoshopped, and I had known for, 6 months that I had stood in the room with the treasure, but nobody knew that until the book came out. So, it's like you watch all this stuff fly around and you can shoot so much of it out of the air so easily, based, certainly on the things that I knew and the things that, we've talked about and all that kind of stuff. And, the stuff in the book, it's there, but, there's a lot of people who just aren't going to believe that, because they don't want to. And, there's a lot of reasons people don't want this thing to end. And at the same time, they're not crazy for thinking that many other treasure hunts of this sort have ended in controversy. Honestly, like more often than not, like big treasure hunts like this, kind of the man-made variety, end badly. The grandfather of all these, Masquerade, out of England from 1979 to 1982, ended in like absolute controversy with an inside job, essentially. And a lot of the other ones have too. So, people aren't crazy to go in that direction. I think that is very clear. And I was very much doing that, until I learned of Jack and met Jack and was able to confirm Jack is a real person who actually has possession of the treasure. So like, I don't think that they, certainly at earlier points in the treasure hunt, I don't blame people for questioning, did Forrest pull this thing, that kind of stuff. But, once there was kind of a preponderance of evidence in my mind, it's incumbent on everybody to re-examine that and say, okay, this guy has the chest. This guy, just because he's not going to tell you where it is, doesn't mean he doesn't know where it was found and all that stuff. Doesn't mean he didn't figure out the poem, all that stuff. So no, I feel very confident that, Jack is the finder and there's not some sort of weird shenanigans going on with the family and all that. I don't feel any of that at all.
I just want to remind our audience that if they have questions for Dan, we have about 6 or 7 minutes left in our evening here, and just to type them into the Q&A and we'll get them answered right away for you. But, I have to feel, Dan, that there's a little bit of melancholy in the searcher community about this, right? There is this, they found it. However, there's a whole constituency, a whole community of searchers out there that no longer have something to look for. And have people picked up the thread in this kind of pursuit in other places? Are there other hunts that are starting to emerge? Is there a whole other community chasing after something else?
There are some little hunts that have kind of come in the wake of this. A lot of the searchers from Fenn's hunt started their own hunts that are obviously much smaller in scale, but kind of trying to pay it forward in some ways. But certainly nothing big has emerged, obviously, on the scale of this thing. And I think there is something, missing for a lot of people from this. And so a lot of the people in the hunt are still trying to kind of reverse engineer the solve. They're still going out there. A lot of them are going to go out this summer and try to find the spot. Now that there's so much more information out there than there was, a year ago at this time. And now that Jack has done interviews with me and has talked to individual searchers online, stuff like that. So, there's much more out there now. And so people want to find the end of the rainbow, even if there's no pot of gold there anymore. That's, as we were saying at the beginning, the value of the chest is part of it, obviously, but it's not what it's all about. A lot of it is just figuring out the answer, figuring out the solve. And so there's a lot of people who are still involved in this and are still trying to figure it out. And, just, they don't think, in their mind, to them, it doesn't have to be over in some ways.
Dan, until I grew familiar with this book, I never heard the term solve used as a noun before. This is all treasure hunting terminology. It's all new to me. I got some more questions here. Patricia wants to know, will this story be turned into a documentary? And also, what's your next book project?
So I'm involved in a documentary that's going to be done about this. I don't think I'm at liberty to say exactly what that is yet, but I am involved in one. And I think there are probably going to be other projects too. There's certainly been a lot of interest in that. And I don't have a next book project at this moment. I am like just honestly in still full scale, like postpartum mode on this one. And it's like, just talking about this all the time, doing whatever I can in this, living this thing. And this one had a lot of twists and turns, in the last year, like, I don't know how much you guys know about book publication, but Jason certainly knows. And it's like, they want the book done essentially a year before, which is why, again, when we had a June release date for this book, which was always going to be this year, why I basically had a draft done roughly a year ago. And then, in reality, it wasn't done until like February, and publishers are not cool with that. They are not excited about that. That is not where they want to be on books. It's like coming out in like 3 months and you're not done yet. So
you mean February of 2021?
Yeah. And like that's not what they like. So, this one was honestly a race to the finish to try to, figure everything out with Jack and, just cover the thing and, where's the treasure? Oh, Fenn's dead. It's like, so, I want a nap is the truth when it comes to like a next book. But, it's something like, hey, somebody got a great idea. Let me know.
You know what? you just do a golf book. You know, it's the same thing as a map.
That sounds good.
Anonymous asks, says, Dan, I loved your book. Thanks for creating such a wonderful memoir of the chase. I'm curious if you tried to interview Forrest or Doug Preston after the find.
I'm sorry, say that last part again.
They want to know if after the find you had an opportunity to interview Forrest or Doug Preston.
I never had more than cursory emails with Forrest after the find. Was trying to basically set up an interview, like a go out there, sit with him, talk to him, interview thing, and then he died. So, I didn't realize the schedule I was on, frankly, in that way. So I never had a meaningful conversation with Forrest after he died, after the chest was found. And I didn't know that was going to be the end,
Oh, sure.
So, which was, I wanted to talk to Forrest again on 100 levels. So, and I did talk to Doug Preston that summer. His comments about that are in the book. And he was actually very helpful to me in kind of giving a window because he had seen Forrest a number of times over that summer. Right. And so he was actually able to give a little context, about Forrest's last days, essentially, and, what he was thinking about the chest and all that kind of stuff. And, he said, he thought that Fenn was disappointed that the chase had ended in his lifetime, I think. And what I've thought about it, is talking to Jack about it, is that I think that Fenn really cherished the experience of getting to meet the finder of his treasure and getting to talk to him about it, getting to talk to the person who figured it out and understood the place where he wanted to die and the journey it took to get there and was able to, solve it, as we say. And there, I guess the verb there, but it's, I think that was really enjoyable for Fenn, and to get to go through the chest again and to get to go through the items again after 10 years and see how, some of them had worn and things like that. All that stuff, I think he really enjoyed. That was a cool moment for him from everything I've been told. At the same time, I think he was a little sad that what he created was not going to outlive him. That, the thing that he had birthed into the world was not going to be there, tantalizing people and having them dream on it after he was gone. So I think that both things existed at the same time, the happiness at that moment and the larger sadness that this no longer existed.
And so we have a last question here from Kathleen, who should be doing my job because this is the perfect question to wrap on, which is, Dan, what lessons did you take away from this experience, which has been, I have to imagine unlike any other kind of, reporting journalistic experience, but even a life experience that you've ever had? What did you take away from this?
I think how easy it is to get caught up and consumed by something, even when you're aware of that, but some of the craziest moments I had out there, were like when we are, myself and my buddy Beep were out, in Yellowstone, and, I'm just following him around, and then all of a sudden, something happens out there, and this is all in the book. And like, I believed with 100% of my being that we were about to find the treasure, and I, like any journalistic remove that I had was like out the window, absolutely out the window. I was like, holy shit, we're about to find the treasure, and I believed it, and I'm searching for it, and I'm going around, and, and you're just in it. You are in it, man. And like how quickly that can kind of take over. And, then things that I, like the first year in the hunt, if somebody told me, oh, well, that part of the, topography looks like the periodic table, so that means this, and that's the rock for gold right there, and that means that, and I would have been like, that is crazy. But then, like, after a year and a half, and I'm like, yeah, that's good thought, man, that's good thinking, so you start to just go, you get into it, you get deep in it, and how quickly it can consume you. I think I was surprised by that, even, for myself. And the other thing was that what surprised me about everybody else was the certainty that people have in their convictions and their solves and their beliefs around this. And that applies to a lot of levels. It applies to the solutions. It applies to the conspiracy theories. It applies to a lot of stuff. But, like, I never believed in anything I was doing in terms of solutions. I was just like, Jay, tell me where to go, man. I don't know. I got nothing. I'm terrible at this. But, so many of the people who I met were just so certain, well, it is here and it is this, and I know this, and this is this. And, obviously everyone can't be right, but, so many of the people were so sure that they were right. So convinced of it. And, like that was something that honestly took me by surprise, and continued to throughout, and I guess, I've just learned how much people can come to believe, if you want to believe something, you will convince yourself of it, and well, Fenn said this, but I know that doesn't apply because my solve says it's here and I know it's right because of this. I was like, well, what about this rule? Well, he doesn't want you to follow that rule because of this.
Right.
So
It's fascinating and sort of speaks to what a remarkably old-fashioned but yet modern parable this is. And so congratulations, Dan, on this book, the success of it, the fancy documentary you got going. I'm sure the movie, who's going to play you in the movie? I'm thinking like maybe Clooney, Brad Pitt.
Look, if Jason Biggs doesn't play me in any movie, then the world has failed. The world has just blown it if that doesn't happen.
Thank you very much to everyone who joined us tonight. And I urge you to find Dan's book through Powell's. And thank you to the Powell's family for having us tonight. It's been really fun to talk about this book, which is a really remarkable American portrait. So thanks, Dan. Thanks, Powell's.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Powell's. This has been great, guys. Appreciate it so much.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, for leading the conversation tonight. Thank you, Daniel, for writing the book. In the chat, I just put in the link to our YouTube page. You can look at some of the other stuff that we've done. This talk will be available probably tomorrow afternoon on our YouTube page. Daniel's book right here. That's it. And I will paste the link to the book again. There it is. Click on that link before we say goodnight. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks again, Jason and Daniel.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys next time. Good night.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate it.